Detective Tom Richardson's weathered hand froze mid-reach for his radio, his 40 years of instinct screaming at him through the crisp Portland morning air. Rex, his 7-year-old German Shepherd partner, had gone rigid beside the park bench, hackles raised, muscles coiled like steel springs, a low growl rumbling from deep in his chest that Tom had never heard before. The woman pushing the stroller looked ordinary enough, but the baby inside made no sound at all. No crying, no babbling, no movement, just unnatural, complete silence that made Tom's blood run cold. Rex lunged forward without warning, his leash snapping taut as a scream tore from the woman's throat. She abandoned the stroller and bolted toward the tree line, her expensive running shoes pounding against the wet pavement. Other joggers stopped mid-stride, coffee cups clattering to the ground as they registered the chaos unfolding. Tom's trembling fingers found his radio as Rex circled the abandoned stroller, whimpering now instead of growling. The detective approached slowly, his heart hammering against his ribs as memories of his daughter Elizabeth flooded back. Another case involving children, another morning that changed everything. "Dispatch, I need backup at Riverside Park immediately." What kind of mother runs from a police officer? And what was wrong with that baby? Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. 3 months earlier, Tom Richardson had been a different man. His small ranch house on Maple Street still echoed with the phantom sounds of a life that used to be. Margaret's morning coffee routine, her humming while she tended the roses, the comfortable silence of a marriage that had weathered 42 years together. Now the house held only memories, and the soft padding of Rex's paws on hardwood floors that had grown too quiet. The German Shepherd had come to him under the worst possible circumstances. Elizabeth, his daughter, had been Rex's first partner on the Portland police force. She'd trained him from a pup, molding him into one of the finest K9 officers the department had ever seen. When that drunk driver took her life 5 years ago, Rex had spent 3 days at the crash site, refusing to leave, whimpering for a partner who would never come home. Tom had no choice but to take him in, 2 broken souls trying to figure out how to live without the woman who had been their whole world. At 64, Tom was facing mandatory retirement in 6 months. 40 years of police work had left him with a modest pension, a house that needed repairs he couldn't afford, and medical bills for an aging dog that were bleeding him dry. Rex's hip dysplasia required expensive treatments, special food, and regular vet visits that cost more than Tom's monthly grocery budget. The other officers at the precinct whispered about him behind his back. The old-timer who couldn't let go, who treated his dead daughter's dog like it was his own child. But Rex wasn't just a dog to Tom. He was the last living connection to Elizabeth, the only family he had left. When Tom set 2 plates on the dinner table each night, a habit left over from his marriage, Rex would sit patiently in Margaret's old chair, watching him with those intelligent brown eyes that seemed to understand everything. The dog knew when Tom's arthritis was acting up, would bring him his pill bottle without being asked. He knew when the nightmares came, would rest his massive head on Tom's chest until the trembling stopped. Dr. Sarah Montgomery ran the most respected pediatric clinic in Portland's affluent Pearl District. Her patients' parents were tech executives, lawyers, and doctors, the kind of people who could afford the best care for their children. She'd built her reputation over 20 years of service, known for going above and beyond for families in crisis. What nobody knew was that Dr. Montgomery's own world had collapsed 10 years ago when she lost her daughter in a custody battle, watching helplessly as the court awarded custody to her ex-husband despite her protests about his drinking. Marcus Webb lived in the shadows between VA appointments and odd jobs that paid cash under the table. The former Army medic couldn't hold down steady work since returning from Afghanistan, where he'd watched too many children die in his arms. His PTSD made normal relationships impossible, but he'd found purpose in helping people who reminded him of the families he couldn't save overseas. When a respected doctor offered him work transporting medical supplies for sick children, it felt like redemption. None of them knew how their paths would collide in Riverside Park on that crisp morning when Rex's instincts would change everything. The baby in the stroller wasn't crying because she couldn't. Tom's trained eye immediately recognized the signs as he knelt beside the abandoned carriage. The child's pupils were dilated, her breathing shallow but steady, her tiny limbs completely relaxed in a way that spoke of chemical sedation rather than natural sleep. Rex circled the stroller with agitated whimpers, his nose twitching as he detected scents that made his hackles rise again. "Easy, boy," Tom murmured, pulling out his phone to call for an ambulance while keeping one eye on the tree line where the woman had disappeared. The baby couldn't have been more than 4 months old, dressed in clean clothes that looked expensive. A pink onesie with delicate embroidery and tiny shoes that cost more than Tom's weekly groceries. But there was something wrong beyond the obvious drugging. No diaper bag, no bottles, no toys or blankets that would indicate a mother's care. Within minutes, Riverside Park swarmed with patrol cars and emergency vehicles. Officer Jenny Phillips, a young social worker who often collaborated with the police on child welfare cases, arrived in the ambulance and immediately took charge of the baby. Tom watched her gentle hands check for injuries, her practiced eye cataloging details that would matter later. "No signs of physical abuse," Jenny reported quietly to Tom as paramedics prepared the infant for transport. "But she's definitely been sedated. This isn't accidental. Someone wanted her quiet and compliant." She paused, studying the child's face. "Tom, look at her left shoulder, that birthmark." Tom leaned closer and saw it, a distinctive strawberry-colored mark shaped like a crescent moon. His breath caught as recognition hit him. "I've seen this before. Missing child report came through about 6 months ago. Baby taken from a young mother in Gresham. Case went cold when the father disappeared too." At the hospital, baby doe number 47 was admitted to the pediatric ward under police protection. The blood tests confirmed what Tom already knew. She'd been given a cocktail of sedatives that would keep an infant quiet for hours without causing permanent damage. Someone had medical knowledge, access to pharmaceutical-grade drugs, and experience in keeping children subdued during transport. Rex refused to leave Tom's side during the hospital visit, something that had never happened before in their 5 years together. The German Shepherd seemed to sense that this case was different, more dangerous than their usual patrol duties. When they passed the pediatric wing, Rex's entire body went rigid, and he let out a low growl that made the nurses step back nervously. "What's got into him?" Dr. Patricia Evans, the attending pediatrician, asked as she updated Tom on the baby's condition. "He's usually so calm around children." Tom studied his partner's behavior, ears flat against his head, eyes focused on something beyond the visible. "He's picking up on something we can't see. Rex has been trained to detect drugs, but his reaction today? It's like he recognizes something specific." The security footage from the park's cameras revealed frustratingly little. The woman had kept her face turned away from every angle, as if she knew exactly where the cameras were positioned. She moved with purpose but not panic until Rex's reaction forced her to run. Her clothes were expensive but nondescript, the kind of athletic wear worn by affluent Portland mothers during their morning routines. Back at the precinct, Tom spread the case files across his desk while Rex lay nearby, occasionally lifting his head when other officers passed. The missing child report from Gresham told a heartbreaking story. 19-year-old Maria Santos had reported her 4-month-old daughter Sophia missing after the baby's father, Miguel, disappeared with the child following a custody dispute. Maria worked 2 jobs to support herself, lived in a rundown apartment, and had no family support system. The kind of vulnerable mother who might not be believed. whose case might not receive full resources. The timing fits, Tom muttered to himself, comparing photos of baby Sophia to the child now in protective custody. Same age, same birthmark, same... He trailed off as Rex suddenly stood and padded to the window, staring out at the parking lot with intense focus. Tom followed his gaze and saw a silver sedan pulling into a visitor's spot. A woman emerged, mid-50s, professional attire, confident stride. She walked toward the precinct entrance with the bearing of someone accustomed to being in charge. Rex's growl was barely audible but unmistakable. "Well, I'll be damned," Tom whispered. "You recognize her, don't you, boy?" The woman introduced herself to the desk sergeant as Dr. Sarah Montgomery. She'd heard about the abandoned baby case and wanted to offer her services as a pediatric specialist. She had experience with traumatized children and could provide medical care during the investigation. Rex's growl grew louder. 40 years of police work had taught Tom to trust his instincts, but 5 years with Rex had taught him something else entirely. Sometimes the most important clues came from a nose that could detect lies in the air itself. Dr. Sarah Montgomery moved through the precinct with the practiced confidence of someone accustomed to being the smartest person in the room. Her silver hair was pulled back in a neat bun, her navy suit impeccable despite the early hour, and her voice carried the authority of 2 decades treating Portland's most influential families. Tom watched her introduce herself to the desk sergeant, noting how Rex's agitation increased with each step she took toward them. "Detective Richardson?" Dr. Montgomery extended a manicured hand as she approached his desk. "I'm Sarah Montgomery from Portland Pediatric Associates. I heard about the abandoned infant and wanted to offer my services. Cases involving drugged children require specialized care." Rex's reaction was immediate and unprecedented. The German Shepherd rose from his usual resting spot, positioning himself directly between Tom and the doctor, his hackles raised in a display of protective aggression that made other officers look up from their paperwork. Tom had never seen his partner react this way to anyone, not criminals, not strangers, not even the veterinarian Rex despised. "Easy, Rex," Tom commanded, but the dog held his ground, brown eyes locked on Dr. Montgomery with an intensity that made her take a step backward. "I'm sorry, Doctor. He's not usually like this." Dr. Montgomery's smile never wavered, but Tom caught the flicker of something in her eyes. Not fear, but calculation. Animals can be unpredictable around hospitals and medical equipment. The scents we carry often disturb them. She maintained her distance from Rex while addressing Tom. "I've reviewed the preliminary medical report on Baby Doe. The sedation cocktail suggests someone with pharmaceutical knowledge." "What kind of knowledge?" Tom asked, studying both the doctor's face and Rex's continued agitation. "The combination of drugs used, benzodiazepines with a mild muscle relaxant, requires understanding of pediatric dosing. Too little and the child becomes difficult to manage. Too much and..." She let the implication hang in the air. "Whoever did this has medical training." Tom pulled out his notebook, jotting down details while keeping one eye on Rex. The dog remained rigid, tail stiff, ears pinned back in a posture that screamed danger. "Any idea where someone would get access to these drugs? Hospitals, clinics, research facilities? The controlled substances list is extensive, but tracking is usually thorough." Dr. Montgomery paused, glancing at Rex. "Perhaps we should discuss this somewhere your partner might be more comfortable?" Before Tom could respond, his phone buzzed with a text message that made his blood run cold. It was from his bank, alerting him to unusual account activity. Someone had accessed his financial records electronically. The timing seemed more than coincidental. "I need to make a call," Tom said, excusing himself and stepping into the hallway. Rex immediately followed, refusing to leave Tom's side even when ordered to stay. The call to his bank confirmed his worst fears. Someone had pulled detailed information about his finances, including his struggles with Rex's medical bills and his upcoming retirement. When Tom returned to his desk, Dr. Montgomery was gone. The desk sergeant mentioned she'd left her card and said she'd be available any time for consultation. Tom studied the elegant business card, Portland Pediatric Associates, located in the heart of the Pearl District's medical complex. That afternoon brought the first real break in the case. Security footage from a gas station near Gresham showed the same silver sedan that had been spotted near the park. The timestamp was from 6 months earlier, right around the time baby Sophia Santos had disappeared. Behind the wheel was Marcus Webb, a name that appeared in the VA system as a former Army medic struggling with PTSD. Tom found Marcus at a homeless shelter downtown, a thin man with haunted eyes and hands that shook slightly when he spoke. Rex's reaction to Marcus was completely different, protective rather than aggressive, as if the dog recognized a wounded soul rather than a threat. "I didn't know," Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper as Tom questioned him in a quiet corner of the shelter. "She told me I was transporting medical supplies for sick children. Special treatments for kids whose families couldn't afford regular hospitals." "Who told you this?" Tom pressed gently, recognizing the signs of psychological manipulation. "Dr. Montgomery. She found me at the VA hospital, said she needed someone with medical training who understood how to handle delicate situations. She knew about my son, how I lost him in Afghanistan, and she said this was a way to save other children." Marcus's hands trembled as he reached into his jacket pocket. "I kept some of the addresses, just in case. Something felt wrong, but I needed the money." The addresses Marcus provided painted a disturbing picture. Upscale neighborhoods in Portland's West Hills, remote cabins in the Cascade foothills, and a private medical facility that didn't appear in any official registry. Each location was connected to Dr. Montgomery's network in some way, either through property records or financial transactions. Rex's behavior became increasingly erratic as they drove to the first address. The dog paced in the back of Tom's cruiser, whimpering and pawing at the windows. When they arrived at a sprawling estate in the hills, Rex immediately began tracking something, leading Tom to a groundskeeper's cottage that had been recently occupied. Inside, Tom found evidence that chilled him to the bone: medical equipment designed for infant care, restraint devices disguised as cribs, and a notebook filled with scheduling information. The entries were coded, but the pattern was clear: pickup dates, transport routes, and delivery confirmations. At the bottom of the last page, a phone number that matched Dr. Montgomery's private line. But it was the photograph tucked inside the notebook that stopped Tom's heart. His daughter Elizabeth, taken during her police academy graduation 5 years ago. On the back, someone had written, "Got too close." Problem solved. Rex sensed Tom's distress and pressed against his legs, offering what comfort he could. But both man and dog knew they'd stumbled onto something much larger and more dangerous than a simple kidnapping case. Dr. Sarah Montgomery wasn't just treating children, she was stealing them. The discovery of Elizabeth's photograph changed everything. Tom sat in his cruiser outside the estate, staring at his daughter's face, while Rex whimpered softly in the back seat. The implications were staggering. Elizabeth hadn't died in a random accident. She'd been investigating the same network Tom had stumbled into, and someone had silenced her permanently. His hands shook as he called Captain Morrison, his supervisor for the past 15 years. "Cap, I need to talk to you about Elizabeth's case. The car accident 5 years ago. I think it was murder." The silence on the other end stretched too long. "Tom, you're getting too close to retirement to start chasing ghosts. That case was closed. Drunk driver, tragic accident, end of story. I'm holding evidence that says otherwise. A photograph of Elizabeth with a note saying, 'Got too close. Problem solved.' This connects to the baby abandonment case from this morning. Bring it in." We'll review it properly." Captain Morrison's tone had shifted, becoming careful and measured in a way that made Tom's instincts flare. "And Tom, don't discuss this with anyone else until we've had a chance to talk." But Tom had been a cop for 40 years. He recognized the sound of someone buying time, and Rex's continued agitation told him they were running out of it fast. Instead of returning to the precinct, he drove to the second address Marcus had provided, a cabin in the Cascade foothills that records showed belonged to a shell company connected to Dr. Montgomery's clinic. The cabin appeared empty from the outside, but Rex immediately began tracking something, his nose to the ground, as he led Tom around the building's perimeter. Behind the structure, partially hidden by overgrown brush, Rex uncovered a disturbing cache: medical waste bags containing used syringes, empty vials that had once held sedatives, and dozens of baby bottles, some still containing traces of formula. Inside the cabin, Tom found what could only be described as a processing center. Multiple cribs lined one wall, each equipped with restraint systems disguised as safety equipment. Medical charts hung on clipboards, documenting the inventory, babies identified only by numbers, ages, and physical descriptions. The clinical detachment of the records made Tom's stomach turn. Baby Doe 47 wasn't the first or even the most recent. The chart showed a steady stream of infants passing through the facility over the past 18 months. Some stayed for days, others for weeks, all being prepared for what the records euphemistically called placement. The financial information was staggering, fees ranging from $250,000 to $500,000 per child depending on age, health, and what the charts coldly referred to as desirability factors. Rex found the most damning evidence in a hidden compartment beneath the floorboards: Elizabeth's original investigation notes, documenting her discovery of the network months before her death. Her handwriting was urgent, desperate as she connected dots between missing children, falsified medical records, and payments to offshore accounts. The final entry, dated just days before her death, contained a single line that made Tom's blood run cold. "They know I know. If something happens to me, look for the children in the Pearl District." The Pearl District. Dr. Montgomery's clinic. Tom's phone buzzed with another text from his bank. Someone had attempted to access his account again, this time trying to transfer money. The amount was significant, enough to cover all of Rex's medical expenses and more. The message was clear. They knew about his financial struggles and were offering a solution. The same way they'd likely recruited Marcus Webb, finding vulnerable people and offering them exactly what they needed most. That evening, Tom received an unexpected visitor. Jenny Phillips, the young social worker who'd helped with Baby Doe, knocked on his door with tears in her eyes and a confession that poured out in broken sentences. "I didn't know what I was doing," she sobbed as Rex positioned himself protectively between her and Tom. "Dr. Montgomery found me after I lost my own baby to SIDS. She said she could help me save other children who weren't wanted, who were being neglected or abused. She showed me case files of babies living in horrible conditions, and I believed I was rescuing them." Jenny's story revealed the true scope of Dr. Montgomery's operation. The doctor had built a network of grieving women, mothers who'd lost children, social workers burned out by the system's failures, nurses who'd witnessed too much suffering. She'd convinced them they were part of a noble cause, saving unwanted babies from lives of poverty and abuse by placing them with wealthy families who could provide everything. She had photographs, Jenny continued, her voice barely audible. Beautiful homes, private schools, college funds, already established. She made us believe we were giving these children fairy tale lives instead of condemning them to struggle like their birth mothers. The psychological manipulation was sophisticated and cruel. Dr. Montgomery had identified each woman's specific grief or frustration and crafted a narrative that transformed their pain into purpose. Jenny had lost her own child and couldn't bear the thought of other babies suffering. Marcus had lost his son in war and needed to believe he was protecting children rather than endangering them. "What about the money?" Tom asked gently. "The families paying for these children, what did they think they were getting?" "Private adoptions?" Jenny whispered. Dr. Montgomery told them she worked with birth mothers who wanted to ensure their children went to the best possible homes. The fees were presented as medical expenses, legal costs, and compensation for the birth mother's care during pregnancy. The adoptive families thought they were saving both mother and child. Rex had gradually relaxed during Jenny's confession, his protective stance softening as he recognized her genuine remorse. But when she mentioned Dr. Montgomery by name, his hackles rose again, reminding Tom that the real threat was still out there. The next morning brought devastating news. Captain Morrison called to inform Tom that he was being placed on administrative leave pending an investigation into his handling of the baby abandonment case. Someone had filed a complaint alleging that Tom had violated procedure, compromised evidence, and was suffering from grief-related psychological issues that affected his judgment. "It's temporary," Morrison said, but his tone suggested otherwise. "Turn in your badge and gun. Rex stays with the department until this is resolved." "Like hell he does." Tom's voice carried 40 years of authority. "Rex is my responsibility. Elizabeth left him to me. Tom, don't make this harder than it needs to be. There are protocols." Tom hung up and looked down at Rex, who seemed to understand that their time was running out. The dog's brown eyes held an intelligence that went beyond training, a connection forged through shared loss and mutual dependence. Whatever was coming next, they would face it together. The pieces of Dr. Montgomery's network were becoming clearer, but so were the stakes. She hadn't just stolen children, she'd murdered a police officer, corrupted multiple agencies, and built a system that preyed on society's most vulnerable members. The wealthy families paying for babies genuinely believed they were participating in legal adoptions. The birth mothers never knew their children had been taken, and the women helping with the operation thought they were saving lives rather than destroying families. Tom spent that afternoon visiting Maria Santos, the young mother whose baby had been taken 6 months earlier. She lived in a one-bedroom apartment in Gresham, working double shifts at a factory to pay rent while grieving for a daughter she'd been told was dead. When Tom showed her the photograph of baby Doe 47, Maria's scream of recognition echoed through the thin walls. "Sophia! My Sophia!" Maria clutched the photograph to her chest, tears streaming down her face. "They told me she died in the hospital. They said there were complications, that I couldn't see her because... She couldn't finish the sentence. Rex approached Maria slowly, gently placing his head against her knee in a gesture of comfort that transcended species. The young mother looked down at the German shepherd with wonder, as if recognizing a kindred spirit who understood loss. "He knows," Maria whispered, stroking Rex's graying muzzle. "He knows what it's like to lose someone." Tom nodded, thinking of Elizabeth and how Rex had refused to leave her grave for 3 days. "He's been my partner through the worst of it. Now he's trying to help bring your daughter home." But bringing Sophia home would require confronting Dr. Montgomery directly, and Tom knew that meant putting both himself and Rex in mortal danger. The network had already killed to protect its secrets. Elizabeth's death proved they wouldn't hesitate to eliminate anyone who got too close to the truth. As evening fell, Tom made a decision that went against every protocol he'd learned in 4 decades of police work. He couldn't trust the system. Too many people were compromised, and baby Doe 47 would disappear into the network permanently if he waited for official channels to work. Rex seemed to sense Tom's resolve. The dog positioned himself by the door, tail alert, ready for whatever came next. They'd already lost Elizabeth. They wouldn't lose Sophia Santos, too. The confrontation came at midnight in Dr. Montgomery's private clinic, a fortress of glass and steel in Portland's Pearl District that gleamed under the streetlights like a monument to medical excellence. Tom had spent hours studying the building's layout, security cameras, and entry points, knowing this would likely be his last case as a police officer. Rex sensed the gravity of the moment, staying closer than usual to Tom's side as they approached the rear entrance. Getting inside proved easier than expected. Jenny Phillips still had her access card from when she'd worked with Dr. Montgomery's network. Her hands shook as she swiped them through the security door, but her voice was steady when she spoke into the intercom system. "Dr. Montgomery, it's Jenny. I need to talk to you about the Santos case. There are complications." The response came immediately, cold and controlled. "Third floor, private office." "Come alone." Tom and Rex took the stairs while Jenny rode the elevator, creating the element of surprise that 40 years of police work had taught Tom to value above all else. The building felt wrong after hours. Too quiet, too sterile, with an underlying scent that made Rex's hackles rise. Medical facilities always carried the smell of disinfectant and fear, but this place reeked of something else entirely: desperation disguised as compassion. Dr. Montgomery's office occupied the entire third floor, a sprawling space that combined medical functionality with the luxury expected by her wealthy clientele. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Portland's skyline sparkled like a jeweled necklace. But Tom's attention focused on the woman behind the mahogany desk who had orchestrated his daughter's murder. She looked different than she had at the precinct, older, more fragile, with shadows under her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and guilty conscience. But her voice remained steady, professional, as if she were discussing treatment options rather than child trafficking. "Detective Richardson, I wondered when you'd find your way here." Dr. Montgomery gestured to the chairs across from her desk, ignoring Rex's low growl. "Please, sit. We have much to discuss." "We have nothing to discuss except where you've hidden the children," Tom said, remaining standing while Rex positioned himself between the desk and the door. "Starting with Sophia Santos." Dr. Montgomery's laugh was bitter, hollow. "Sophia Santos? Is that what you're calling her now? The child has a new name, a new family, a new life with parents who can actually provide for her, unlike her teenage mother who worked in a factory and lived in a slum." "You murdered my daughter to keep this operation running." Tom's voice carried the weight of 5 years of grief. "Elizabeth was getting too close to the truth, wasn't she?" "Elizabeth was naive," Dr. Montgomery replied, her professional mask slipping slightly. "She saw everything in black and white: stolen children, grieving mothers, evil doctors. She couldn't understand the complexity of what we were doing here." "Explain it to me." Tom pulled out his phone, setting it on the desk between them with the voice recorder app visible. "Help me understand how murdering a police officer and stealing babies counts as medical care." Dr. Montgomery stood and walked to the windows, her reflection ghost-like against the city lights. When she spoke, her voice carried a pain that Tom recognized. The same devastation he'd felt when Elizabeth died, the same grief that had hollowed out his life. "I lost my daughter 10 years ago. Not to death, but to a custody battle that ripped her away from me because the court decided that her father's money mattered more than my love." Her hands pressed against the glass as if trying to reach through it. "I watched her grow up in photographs stolen from social media, saw her first day of school, her birthday parties, her Christmas mornings, all from a distance because a judge decided I wasn't worthy of being her mother." Rex whimpered softly, responding to the raw emotion in her voice despite recognizing her as a threat. The sound seemed to trigger something in Dr. Montgomery, and she turned back toward Tom with tears streaming down her face. "Do you know what it's like to lose a child, Detective?" "Of course you do." Elizabeth was everything to you, just like Hannah was everything to me. But imagine if Elizabeth hadn't died quickly in an accident. Imagine if she'd been taken from you slowly, legally, while you were forced to watch from the sidelines. So you decided to take other people's children to fill that void, Tom said quietly. You convinced yourself you were saving them. I was saving them. Dr. Montgomery's professional composure shattered completely. Do you have any idea what kind of lives these children were facing? Maria Santos worked 16-hour shifts in a factory, left her baby with neighbors who barely spoke English, lived in a building where drug dealers controlled the hallways. The family who adopted Sophia, they're tech executives with a house in the hills, a college fund already established, nannies with medical training. Which life would you choose for a child you loved? Tom studied her face, seeing the terrible logic that had led a grieving mother to become a child trafficker. You made that choice for dozens of families. You played God with their lives. I played Savior! Dr. Montgomery slammed her hand against the desk, causing Rex to shift into a more protective stance. Every child I placed found a better life. Every adoptive family got the child they desperately wanted. Every birth mother was spared the burden of raising a child in poverty. What about their right to choose? What about love being more important than money? Tom's voice rose slightly. You stole those choices from everyone involved. Dr. Montgomery pulled a tablet from her desk drawer, scrolling through what appeared to be surveillance photos. Look at them, she demanded, showing Tom images of well-dressed children playing in elaborate yards, attending private schools, riding expensive bicycles. These are my success stories, children who would have grown up in trailer parks and housing projects now attending the finest schools in the country. Built on a foundation of lies and murder, Tom said. Elizabeth discovered the truth, and you had her killed to protect your delusions. Elizabeth's death was tragic but necessary. Dr. Montgomery's voice had returned to its clinical detachment. She was going to destroy something beautiful, something that had saved dozens of children from lives of mediocrity and want. I couldn't let that happen. Rex's growl intensified as Jenny Phillips emerged from the elevator, but instead of the scared social worker who'd confessed to Tom, she moved with calm purpose toward a cabinet near the windows. Tom's instincts screamed danger, but before he could react, Jenny had retrieved a syringe and was moving toward him. I'm sorry, Detective, Jenny said, though her voice carried no emotion. Dr. Montgomery helped me understand that some sacrifices are necessary for the greater good, just like Elizabeth had to be sacrificed. The revelation hit Tom like a physical blow. Jenny hadn't been manipulated. She'd been a willing participant in Elizabeth's murder. The tears, the confession, the apparent remorse, all of it had been performance designed to get him here, alone and vulnerable. You killed my daughter, Tom whispered, the truth settling over him like ice water. I drove the truck that hit her car, Jenny confirmed matter-of-factly. Dr. Montgomery explained that Elizabeth was going to hurt innocent children, destroy families, ruin something beautiful. It was surprisingly easy to make it look like an accident. Rex launched himself at Jenny before Tom could move, 80 pounds of protective fury slamming into her chest and sending the syringe flying across the room. But Dr. Montgomery had anticipated this, producing a gun from her desk drawer with the smooth efficiency of someone who'd planned for this moment. Call off your dog, Detective, or I'll put him down like I should have done to Elizabeth years ago. Tom's world narrowed to the barrel of the gun pointed at Rex, who was still pinning Jenny to the floor, but now vulnerable to Dr. Montgomery's weapon. 40 years of police training warred with 5 years of loving partnership with the German Shepherd who'd become his family. Let him go, Jenny, Tom said quietly. Rex, here. Rex released Jenny reluctantly, backing toward Tom but keeping his eyes fixed on both women. The trust in those brown eyes, the absolute faith that Tom would protect him the way he'd protected Tom countless times. made the detective's heart break. "Now we need to discuss your retirement arrangements, Detective," Dr. Montgomery said, keeping the gun trained on Rex. "You're going to write a report stating that the baby abandonment case was a misunderstanding, that no crime was committed, and that your grief over Elizabeth has affected your judgment. Then you're going to take your pension and disappear." "And if I refuse?" Dr. Montgomery's smile was cold as winter. "Then Rex joins Elizabeth, and the Santos baby disappears into a system where she'll never be found. Your choice, Detective. Save your dog or save a child you've never met." The same impossible choice Elizabeth had faced. Protect the greater good or protect what you love most. Tom understood now why his daughter had fought so hard against this network and why it had ultimately cost her life. Rex pressed against Tom's leg, offering comfort even while facing his own death. In that moment, the German Shepherd represented everything pure about loyalty, love, and sacrifice that Dr. Montgomery's twisted philosophy had corrupted. Tom made his choice. Tom's decision came not from his 40 years of police training, but from the memory of Elizabeth's voice on her last voicemail. "Dad, if anything happens to me, promise you'll take care of Rex. He's got more heart than most people I know." The German Shepherd had already lost one partner to Dr. Montgomery's network. Tom wouldn't let him lose another. "You're right about one thing," Tom said quietly, his hand moving slowly toward his backup weapon concealed at his ankle. "Some sacrifices are necessary." Rex must have sensed Tom's intention because the dog suddenly dropped low, presenting a smaller target while positioning himself to spring. The movement distracted Dr. Montgomery for a crucial half-second, her gun barrel following Rex's motion just as Tom drew his backup pistol and fired. The shot caught Dr. Montgomery in the shoulder, spinning her around and sending her weapon clattering across the office floor. Jenny lunged for the gun, but Rex was faster, his powerful jaws clamping down on her wrist with enough force to make her scream and release her grip. "Portland Police! Nobody move!" The voice came from the stairwell as backup officers Tom had secretly called before entering the building finally arrived. He'd sent a delayed text message to his old partner Detective Mills, knowing that even if he was suspended, Mills would respond to a call for help. Dr. Montgomery clutched her wounded shoulder, her face pale but her voice still defiant. "You have no idea what you've destroyed. Those children will go back to lives of poverty and neglect. The families who wanted them will remain childless. You've ruined everything in the name of your narrow-minded view of justice." "I've stopped a kidnapping ring," Tom replied, applying pressure to her wound despite his anger. 40 years of being a cop meant saving lives, even the lives of people who'd murdered his daughter. "Those children belong with their real families, not with the highest bidder." Jenny Phillips sat on the floor, cradling her injured wrist while Rex kept watch over her. The young woman who'd seemed so remorseful just hours earlier now stared at Tom with cold hatred. "You don't understand what Dr. Montgomery was trying to do. She was saving children from lives of misery." "She was stealing babies and selling them," Detective Mills said as he secured the scene with 3 other officers, "and apparently murdering cops who got too close to the truth." The next hour brought a parade of revelations as Dr. Montgomery's office was searched and her computer files decrypted. The scope of the network was staggering. 47 children stolen over 3 years, sold to wealthy families for a total of over $12 million. The money had been used to fund the operation, pay off corrupt officials, and maintain the facade of legitimate adoption services. Most heartbreaking were the files on the birth families. Dr. Montgomery had specifically targeted young mothers with limited resources, single women working multiple jobs, immigrants without strong community connections, anyone who might not be believed if they reported their children missing, or who could be convinced their babies had died due to medical complications. Rex found the final piece of evidence in a hidden safe behind a medical diploma. Elizabeth's original investigation notes, more complete than the copies Tom had discovered at the cabin, detailed not just the kidnapping network, but also the murder plot against her. Dr. Montgomery had realized Elizabeth was closing in and had ordered her death with the same clinical detachment she'd shown when discussing the stolen children. She knew they were coming for her, Detective Mills said, reading Elizabeth's final entries. Look at this. She hid copies of everything in 3 different locations, including her partner's house. Tom's heart nearly stopped. Rex's house. My house. They found Elizabeth's insurance policy in the basement, hidden in a waterproof container behind the furnace where Rex had been scratching at the walls for months. Tom had assumed the dog was chasing mice, but Rex had been trying to alert him to his daughter's final gift, evidence that would bring down the entire network. The photographs, financial records, and recorded phone conversations Elizabeth had gathered provided prosecutors with an airtight case against not just Dr. Montgomery and Jenny Phillips, but also the lawyers, social workers, and medical staff who'd facilitated the operation. Most shocking were the recordings of Dr. Montgomery's conversations with prospective adoptive parents, promising them healthy babies from young women who understood their children deserved better opportunities. As paramedics treated Dr. Montgomery's gunshot wound, she made one final attempt at justification. "Those children will suffer now," she told Tom. "You've condemned them to lives of struggle and want because you couldn't see past your own grief." Tom knelt beside Rex, running his fingers through the German shepherd's graying fur. The dog had given everything, his youth, his health, his unwavering loyalty, to help solve the case that had killed his first partner. Now they both faced an uncertain future, but at least they faced it with the truth finally exposed. "Maybe those children will struggle sometimes," Tom said quietly. "But they'll struggle with people who love them unconditionally, not people who bought them like merchandise." That has to count for something. Rex pressed against Tom's leg, offering comfort as sirens wailed outside and justice finally began its slow march forward. The network was broken, but the cost had been devastating for everyone involved. The truth about Elizabeth's death shattered Tom's world more completely than her loss itself had 5 years earlier. Sitting in the hospital waiting room while Rex underwent emergency surgery for stress-induced complications, Tom stared at his daughter's investigation files and felt the weight of every missed clue, every assumption he'd accepted without question. Elizabeth hadn't been driving to the grocery store when Jenny Phillips ran her off the road. She'd been heading to meet a contact who'd promised information about Dr. Montgomery's network, a meeting that had been orchestrated specifically to get her alone and vulnerable. The drunk driver's story had been a carefully constructed lie, complete with falsified blood alcohol reports and witness statements from people who'd been paid to corroborate the deception. "She fought until the end," Detective Mills said quietly, reviewing Elizabeth's final phone records. "Her last call was to the FBI field office in Seattle. She knew she was running out of time and tried to get federal authorities involved. But the call had never gone through. Dr. Montgomery's network included someone with access to emergency dispatch systems who'd rerouted Elizabeth's final plea for help to a deadline. She'd died believing her evidence would never reach the people who could act on it, not knowing that Rex would eventually lead her father to the truth. The German shepherd emerged from surgery weaker than Tom had ever seen him. At 7 years old, Rex was already considered elderly for his breed, and the stress of the past week had accelerated his decline. The veterinarian, Dr. Patricia Lane, delivered the news with gentle honesty that Tom appreciated even as it broke his heart. "His hip dysplasia has worsened significantly, and the stress has triggered some cardiac irregularities," she explained while Rex lay sedated on the examination table. "He's a fighter," but his body is wearing out faster than we can treat the problems. I'd estimate he has maybe 6 months if we manage his pain carefully." Tom stroked Rex's graying muzzle, remembering the vibrant young dog Elizabeth had brought home from the academy. Rex had given everything, his health, his prime years, his unwavering devotion to the job and to the people he loved. Now he was facing the same choice Tom had feared for months: expensive treatments that might extend life but couldn't restore quality, or letting nature take its course. "What would Elizabeth want?" Tom asked quietly, though he already knew the answer. Elizabeth had always believed that love meant making the hard choices, even when they hurt. The media attention was overwhelming. Within hours of Dr. Montgomery's arrest, news crews surrounded Tom's house, Portland General Hospital, and the precinct. The story had everything that captured public attention: murdered police officers, stolen babies, wealthy conspirators, and a heroic dog who'd helped solve the case. But the reality was messier than the headlines suggested. Of the 47 children Dr. Montgomery's network had stolen, only 12 could be immediately reunited with their birth families. The others had been placed with adoptive families who genuinely believed they were participating in legal adoptions, creating a legal and emotional nightmare that would take years to resolve. Maria Santos was one of the lucky ones. When Tom brought her to the hospital to see Sophia, now officially restored to her birth name, the reunion was everything he'd hoped it would be, and everything that broke his heart about his own losses. "My baby," Maria sobbed, holding her daughter for the first time in 6 months. "They told me you died. They said there were complications and I couldn't see you because—" She couldn't finish the sentence through her tears. Sophia, now 10 months old, studied her birth mother's face with the solemn attention of a child who'd learned not to trust easily. But when Maria began singing a Spanish lullaby she'd sung during pregnancy, Sophia's expression softened, some deep recognition stirring in her infant memory. Tom watched the reunion from the doorway, Rex lying quietly at his feet. The dog's tail wagged weakly when Sophia laughed for the first time, a sound that seemed to validate everything they'd endured to reach this moment. "She's beautiful," Tom said to Maria, meaning it. Elizabeth would have loved to see this. But not every reunion would be so clear-cut. The adoptive families who'd paid Dr. Montgomery's fees faced losing children they'd raised and loved, believing they were legitimate parents. Some had already bonded with their adopted children for months or years, creating attachments that couldn't be easily severed. The Hendersons were typical of Dr. Montgomery's clients, a successful tech executive and his physician wife who'd struggled with infertility for years before being introduced to what they believed was a private adoption service. They'd paid $300,000 for a baby boy they'd named Connor, never suspecting he'd been stolen from a teenage mother who'd been told her son died during delivery. "We love him," Sarah Henderson pleaded with Tom during a meeting at the family court building. "We've been his parents for 8 months. We're the only family he's ever known. How is destroying our family helping anyone?" The question haunted Tom because he understood both sides. The Hendersons were victims too, manipulated by Dr. Montgomery's lies and false documentation. But somewhere in Portland, a 17-year-old named Carmen Martinez was grieving for a son she'd been told was dead, not knowing he was being raised by strangers just 20 miles away. Rex seemed to understand the moral complexity better than the humans involved. During the court hearings to determine custody arrangements, the German Shepherd would position himself where he could see all the parties: birth parents, adoptive parents, and children caught in between. His behavior suggested he recognized the pain on all sides without judgment. Dr. Montgomery's psychological evaluation revealed the depth of her delusion and the tragedy that had created it. The loss of her own daughter in a custody battle had genuinely broken something fundamental in her psyche, creating a twisted logic that justified stealing other people's children to save them from lives she deemed inadequate. She truly believed she was doing good, the court-appointed psychiatrist explained to Tom. The cognitive dissonance between her actions and her self-image required increasingly elaborate justifications until she'd constructed an entire worldview where kidnapping was rescue and murder was protection. Jenny Phillips proved to be a different kind of monster entirely. Unlike Dr. Montgomery's delusional altruism, Jenny had been motivated by pure grief and resentment. She'd lost her own baby to SIDS and had never forgiven the world for allowing her child to die while other undeserving mothers got to keep theirs. She was angry at Maria Santos for being young and alive when her own baby was dead, the prosecutor explained. Dr. Montgomery gave her a way to act on that anger while convincing herself she was doing good, the perfect psychological manipulation. The financial investigation revealed that Dr. Montgomery had made over $12 million from her operation, but had spent most of it maintaining the network and paying off corrupt officials. She'd lived modestly, reinvesting almost everything back into what she saw as her charitable mission. The adoptive families faced financial ruin as well as emotional devastation. Their payments to Dr. Montgomery were considered proceeds from criminal activity, making them difficult to recover even though the families had acted in good faith. Many faced bankruptcy on top of losing the children they'd raised as their own. Tom found himself in an unexpected position as the investigation concluded. His suspension was lifted, and he was offered commendations for solving Elizabeth's murder and dismantling the trafficking network. But the victory felt hollow when he considered the collateral damage. Dozens of families torn apart, children traumatized by multiple separations, and a system that had failed to protect its most vulnerable members. Rex's condition continued to deteriorate despite the best veterinary care. The German Shepherd's mobility decreased daily, and the medications that managed his pain left him groggy and disoriented. Tom found himself facing the same impossible choice Dr. Montgomery had forced on so many families: hold on to what he loved despite the suffering it caused, or let go in the name of mercy. The decision came one evening when Rex struggled to stand up to greet Tom at the door. The dog's eyes still held their intelligence and devotion, but his body had finally reached its limits. Tom knelt beside his partner, running his fingers through the familiar fur, while Rex's tail managed a few weak wags. "You did good, boy," Tom whispered. "Elizabeth would be proud of both of us." Dr. Lane came to the house the next morning, bringing the peaceful ending that Rex deserved. Tom held his partner as the injection took effect, feeling the strong heart that had never failed him finally grow still. Rex's last act was to lick Tom's hand, a gesture of forgiveness and love that summed up their entire relationship. The funeral drew hundreds of mourners, police officers, veterans, families whose children had been rescued, and community members who'd followed the story. Rex was buried next to Elizabeth in Portland's Riverside Cemetery, his headstone reading simply, "Rex Richardson, loyal partner, devoted son, hero." Tom stood alone at the graveside after the crowd dispersed, staring at the two headstones that marked the end of his family. At 64, facing retirement with a modest pension and an empty house, he felt older than his years and uncertain about whatever came next. Then Maria Santos approached, carrying 10-month-old Sophia and accompanied by a social worker Tom didn't recognize. "Detective Richardson," Maria said quietly, "there's something I need to tell you." "Something Sophia's birth certificate doesn't show." Tom turned toward her, noting the nervous way she held her daughter and the official documents the social worker carried. "Sophia isn't just my daughter," Maria continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "Her father was Miguel Santos, but Miguel wasn't my boyfriend. He was my caseworker who took advantage of his position. I was too ashamed to report it, and when I got pregnant, I thought I could handle everything alone." The social worker stepped forward. "What Maria is trying to tell you is that there's no one else, no grandparents, no extended family, no support system. If anything happens to Maria, Sophia would go into the foster system." Tom felt a familiar stirring in his chest, the same protective instinct that had driven him through 40 years of police work and 5 years of mourning. He looked down at Sophia, who was studying his face with Elizabeth's dark eyes and Rex's unwavering attention. "What are you asking me?" Tom said, though he already knew. Maria's tears started again. "You saved her once. You brought her home to me. But I'm 17, working 2 jobs, and I don't have anyone to help if something goes wrong. Rex saw something special in her that first day. Maybe he was trying to tell us something." The social worker opened her folder. "It would be an unusual arrangement, but we could set up a legal guardianship. You'd be Sophia's appointed guardian if anything happened to Maria, and Maria could request your assistance with childcare when her work schedule requires it." Tom looked at Elizabeth's headstone, remembering her voice from that last voicemail. "Promise you'll take care of Rex." But maybe the promise went deeper than that. Maybe it included taking care of everyone who needed protection, everyone who'd been abandoned by a system that was supposed to keep them safe. Sophia reached toward Tom with chubby fingers, making the decision for him. As he took her small hand in his weathered one, he felt something shift inside his chest. Not the crushing weight of grief he'd carried for 5 years, but the lighter sensation of purpose returning. "Let's talk about it," Tom said. 6 months later, Tom Richardson's house on Maple Street had transformed from a mausoleum of memories into something resembling a home again. The silence that had haunted every room for 5 years was broken by the sounds of life. Sophia's babbling from her high chair, Maria's laughter as she studied for her GED at the kitchen table, and the gentle chaos that comes with raising a child. The legal arrangements had taken months to finalize, but the unconventional family structure was working better than anyone had expected. Maria maintained primary custody of Sophia, while Tom served as legal guardian and primary caregiver during her work hours. The 17-year-old mother was determined to finish high school and eventually attend community college, goals that seemed impossible when she was struggling alone, but achievable with support. "She's got your stubborn streak," Maria told Tom one evening as they watched 15-month-old Sophia attempt to climb onto the couch by herself. "Elizabeth's eyes, but your determination to do everything the hard way." Tom smiled, settling into his favorite armchair with Sophia on his lap. The child had grown comfortable in his house, treating him with the easy affection of a grandchild who'd never known abandonment or uncertainty. She called him Papa Tom in a voice that reminded him painfully and wonderfully of Elizabeth at the same age. The aftermath of Dr. Montgomery's network had been as complex as Tom had feared. Of the 47 children involved, 23 had been successfully reunited with their birth families after extensive legal proceedings. The remaining 24 cases were still working through the courts, caught between birth parents who wanted their children back and adoptive families who'd raised them in good faith. The Hendersons had been among the families forced to return a child they'd raised for nearly 2 years. 8-year-old Connor Martinez had no memory of his birth mother Carmen, who'd been only 16 when Dr. Montgomery's network told her he'd died during delivery. The transition was heartbreaking for everyone involved, requiring months of supervised visits and family therapy to help Connor understand why his world had been turned upside down. "There are no good guys and bad guys in this," the family court judge had explained to Tom during one of the custody hearings where he'd been called as a witness. "Just damaged people trying to love children in a broken system." Marcus Webb had become an unexpected ally in helping other victims of Dr. Montgomery's manipulation. His experience as a veteran struggling with PTSD made him uniquely qualified to counsel other men and women who'd been exploited by the network. He'd established a support group that met weekly at the VA hospital, helping people process the guilt and confusion of discovering they'd been unwitting participants in child trafficking. "I kept telling myself I was saving kids," Marcus confided to Tom during one of their regular coffee meetings. "Turns out I was just another victim being used by someone who understood exactly which buttons to push." Recovery means accepting that good intentions don't excuse the harm we caused. Jenny Phillips had received a 20-year sentence for her role in Elizabeth's murder and the kidnapping network. During the trial, her defense attorney had argued that she was as much a victim as a perpetrator, manipulated by Dr. Montgomery's psychological expertise and driven by untreated grief over her own child's death. But Tom felt no sympathy for the woman who'd killed his daughter. Elizabeth had been investigating the network to save children, while Jenny had participated in their exploitation out of spite and jealousy. Some choices couldn't be forgiven, regardless of the pain that motivated them. Dr. Sarah Montgomery's trial had been a media spectacle that divided public opinion. Her defense team portrayed her as a grieving mother whose mental health had been destroyed by losing custody of her daughter, leading her to genuinely believe she was rescuing other children from similar fates. The prosecution painted her as a calculating criminal who'd built a multi-million-dollar operation by exploiting society's most vulnerable members. Tom had testified at both trials, describing the investigation that had cost him Elizabeth and Rex, but had ultimately brought justice for dozens of families. The hardest part was explaining how Dr. Montgomery's twisted logic had contained just enough truth to be convincing. Some of the stolen children had indeed come from difficult circumstances, and their adoptive families could provide material advantages their birth families couldn't match. The question isn't whether those children might have been better off financially with their adoptive families, Tom had told the jury. The question is whether anyone has the right to make that choice without the knowledge and consent of the people it affects most. Dr. Montgomery played God with other people's lives, and people died because of her arrogance. The jury had agreed, convicting Dr. Montgomery on 47 counts of kidnapping, conspiracy, and racketeering. Her sentence of life in prison without parole ensured she would never again have the opportunity to separate families in the name of her distorted vision of child welfare. The financial investigation had revealed the true scope of the network's impact. The $12 million Dr. Montgomery had collected from adoptive families was largely unrecoverable, having been spent on bribes, operational expenses, and maintaining the facade of legitimate medical practice. Many of the adoptive families faced bankruptcy in addition to losing the children they'd raised, creating another layer of victims in an already tragic situation. Tom's own financial situation had improved dramatically through an unexpected source. The Portland Police Bureau had established a fund to support Rex's veterinary expenses, but after the German Shepherd's death, the money had been donated to Tom for Sophia's care. Combined with his pension and the modest life insurance policy Elizabeth had left him, he was able to provide the stability that Maria and Sophia needed. The house itself had been transformed to accommodate its new residents. The spare bedroom that had gathered dust for 5 years became Sophia's nursery, painted in soft yellows and decorated with pictures of Rex that Maria had found in Elizabeth's belongings. Tom had installed safety gates and child-proof locks, learning to see his home through the eyes of a curious toddler who found danger in every corner. Maria had proven to be a remarkable young mother despite her youth and circumstances. She worked 25 hours a week at a local grocery store while completing her high school equivalency program, determined to build a better future for herself and her daughter. Her relationship with Tom had evolved from grateful dependence to genuine friendship, built on shared love for Sophia and mutual respect for each other's sacrifices. "I never had a father figure," Maria admitted to Tom one evening as they cleaned up after Sophia's birthday party. "My own dad left when I was 12, and Miguel, he wasn't someone I could trust." You're showing me what good men look like, how they treat the people they care about." Tom had struggled with the transition from solitary grief to surrogate grandfather. His routines, established over 5 years of living alone, had to accommodate the chaos of child-rearing. But Sophia's presence had awakened parts of himself that had been dormant since Elizabeth's childhood. Patience for endless questions, enthusiasm for simple pleasures, and the protective instincts that had made him a good police officer and would make him a devoted guardian. The community response had been overwhelming. The neighbors who'd worried about the reclusive widower living alone now brought casseroles and offered babysitting services. The officers at Tom's former precinct had organized fundraisers and donated toys, clothes, and equipment that Maria couldn't afford on her limited income. Most touching had been the support from other families affected by Dr. Montgomery's network. Carmen Martinez, who'd been reunited with her son Connor after a difficult transition period, had become Maria's mentor and friend. The two young mothers met regularly to share experiences and support each other through the ongoing legal proceedings and therapy sessions required for all the network's victims. "We're like combat veterans," Carmen had joked during one of their coffee meetings that Tom had attended. "Nobody else understands what it's like to have your child stolen and returned, to feel grateful and traumatized at the same time." The investigation had also led to systemic changes in how missing children cases were handled. Elizabeth's hidden files had revealed gaps in communication between jurisdictions that had allowed Dr. Montgomery's network to operate undetected for years. New protocols required cross-referencing missing children reports with unusual adoption patterns and medical records, changes that might prevent similar operations in the future. Tom's role as a consultant on child trafficking cases had given his retirement new purpose. Other police departments regularly requested his expertise on cases involving suspicious adoptions or missing children, work that honored Elizabeth's memory while helping other families find closure. But the most meaningful change was the simplest one. Tom's dinner table, which had been set for one person for 5 years, now accommodated 3. Sophia sat in her high chair between Tom and Maria, babbling happily while she destroyed whatever food they'd attempted to feed her. The conversations ranged from Maria's school assignments to Sophia's developmental milestones to Tom's stories about Elizabeth and Rex. "Tell her about the dog," Maria would request when Sophia was fussy, knowing that stories about Rex always calmed the child. Tom would describe Rex's loyalty, his intelligence, his unwavering devotion to protecting the people he loved. Sophia would listen with the solemn attention of someone too young to understand the words but old enough to recognize love in the speaker's voice. On quiet evenings, Tom would sit in his armchair with Sophia on his lap, reading to her from the same books he'd read to Elizabeth decades earlier. The child would study the pictures with intense concentration, occasionally reaching up to pat Tom's face with sticky fingers. These moments felt like gifts, opportunities to be the grandfather he'd never expected to become, loving a child who carried his daughter's eyes and his own stubborn determination. The house on Maple Street was full again, but it was a different kind of fullness than Tom had known with Margaret and Elizabeth. This family had been forged by tragedy and bound together by choice rather than biology. Maria wasn't his daughter, and Sophia wasn't his granddaughter, but love had made them family in every way that mattered. Sometimes, in the early morning quiet before Sophia woke up, Tom would look at the framed photographs of Elizabeth and Rex on the mantelpiece and feel their presence in the life he'd built from the ashes of their loss. He'd kept his promise to Elizabeth by taking care of Rex until the end, and now he was keeping a different promise, to honor their memory by protecting and nurturing new life. "Back in my day, we believed family was about blood," Tom said to Sophia one evening as he rocked her to sleep. "These old bones are learning that family is really about choice, about showing up for the people who need you most." Sophia's response was to grab his finger with her tiny fist and hold on tight. the same way Rex used to rest his head on Tom's knee when comfort was needed. The gesture spoke of trust, love, and the unbreakable bonds that form between souls who choose to care for each other. Outside, Portland's lights twinkled like stars, and inside, three people who'd found each other through tragedy continued the slow work of building something beautiful from broken pieces. The silence that had once filled every corner of the house was gone forever, replaced by the sound of family, imperfect, unconventional, but absolutely real. Sometimes life's greatest chapters begin when we think our story is ending. At 64, Tom Richardson thought his purpose died with his daughter Elizabeth and his loyal partner Rex. His house echoed with silence, his dinner table set for one, his heart carrying the weight of 5 years of grief. But life had other plans. Through tragedy and loss, through pursuing justice against impossible odds, Tom discovered that family isn't always what you're born into. Sometimes it's what chooses you. When 17-year-old Maria needed help raising baby Sophia and Sophia needed a grandfather's love, three broken souls found healing in each other. The same house that had been a tomb of memories became a sanctuary of laughter, learning, and second chances. Tom's weathered hands, once skilled at solving crimes, learned to change diapers and read bedtime stories. His retirement, which he'd feared would be empty and meaningless, became filled with purpose as he helped raise a child who carries his daughter's eyes and his own stubborn hope. Love doesn't diminish when shared. It multiplies, creating families from the most unexpected circumstances and proving that it's never too late to begin again. Have you ever found unexpected family later in life, or discovered new purpose when you thought your best years were behind you? What moment made you realize that endings can actually be beautiful beginnings? Share your story in the comments. We'd love to hear how life surprised you with second chances.